This podcast may contain strong language and adult themes. Hello you, welcome back to Voice Notes from Connor, the podcast where I, Connor, listen back to old voice notes and memos from we'll call it my past self, and respond as my present self with some guests along the way. We have a guest today, which I'm very excited about. So we have 3 voice notes in this episode, 1 from my past self, then we're going to hear from my best friend Bridgette, and then we've got another one from my past self. So, Evan, when you're ready, let's do it. Got a message on Grindr from a blank profile. Typical. Classic. Peak Grindr. And in their profile, so they've got a blank profile, messaged me to say hey, and then on in their bio, they said that they're looking for like a drinking buddy, someone to have fun with, and that they have to be careful sending a photo because of work. What kind of job or employment or sector, line of work, would you have to be careful about being gay or being queer, whatever it might be, or even being on an app like Grindr, because it's your personal life? Yes, sometimes personal and employment, so personal life and work life do overlap, or they can overlap. However, I think a lot of people try to keep them separate, and that's fine. I think workplaces should also respect that people have their own lives and things that they do in their lives, as long as there's a legality to it or it's ethical. You know, there's obviously lines and boundaries, but what kind of job would be bothered or you'd have to be careful about being gay, queer, LGBTQ+, etc.? Yeah, genuinely intrigued. And I still am intrigued because this is a phenomenon on Grindr. If you've used Grindr before, you will have come across a blank profile or been messaged by a blank profile or liked by a blank profile. Now, this is something you don't really see on other apps, I suppose, like, say, Tinder, where you have to have at least 1 or 2 photos on your profile. I mean, some people do just put a photo of their dog or garden or something, because maybe they're too shy, and they don't want to put a photo on their actual Tinder profile. But Grindr, obviously an app mainly used by queer men and some other people as well. Obviously been around for quite a long time now, so you've probably heard of it if you've not used it. But so blank profiles are one thing. So maybe some people feel shy. Maybe they don't want to put their photo on. Some people will message you and then they'll send a photo with the message like, hey, how are you? Here's 3 photos of me. Fair enough. But you will also find, usually in most cities and places, there'll be a couple of profiles. It's blank. Then in their bio it says, as my past self said there, can't put pictures on for work. Now, I've seen this over years, and literally every time I see it, I think, what job would that be? What job would, if they found out you were queer or gay or not straight, basically, or you were having sex with men and that's what you wanted to do and you were having fun, basically, in your free time, would sack you or give you a disciplinary, or you would be, like, sanctioned in some kind of way? Now, if we think about, there's a few things there, isn't there? For me, it just feels like that it's people think that's a bulletproof excuse to not be able to show their photos because they don't want to out themselves, maybe because they are not out and they fear that someone then would maybe recognise them and tell their family or their friends, and there's that aspect of secrecy about it. But rather than just saying, I'm not out, I don't want to share photos or whatever, obviously you're maybe not then going to get as much attention or many replies, people frame it around this like, oh, I can't because of work. Now, if you think of the Equality Act 2010, that actually protects people. There's 9 protected characteristics, and one of them is sexual orientation. So you cannot be discriminated against in a workplace or other places in society on the grounds of your sexuality. So you're not going to be sacked or you're not going to be in trouble unless you had a really intensely or obviously homophobic, transphobic, etc., bigoted manager or supervisor. And we also got to think of, in our culture, I mean, at the time of recording, for a long time now, actually, but, we're getting so many angry, loud, right-wing voices that are really bigoted. But we would say broadly that gay and lesbian identities are generally accepted in our society. Yes, there's going to be some bigoted people or homophobic, but it's less common than it would have been 20, 30 years ago now. So you've also got that kind of social and cultural discourse around, there's maybe not as much fear or danger that comes from coming out. If we took an intersectional perspective, we could say that maybe for some working class men growing up in those environments like I did, where maybe gender stereotypes and norms are more aggressively policed, that becomes more difficult. Or maybe even from certain religious backgrounds, it makes it more difficult. So again, I can add a bit of nuance and a bit of compassion to some people in their circumstance, but framing it around, I can't because of my job, just feels really kind of like, it's such a hollow excuse to me. It doesn't really work in 2025. And I mean, if you know any types of jobs that maybe would sanction someone, let us know. You can email us at vnfcpodcast@outlook.com. We're on TikTok as well. You can let us know there, because I am genuinely intrigued. If people know about it, then I'd want to know. But I can't imagine there's any jobs where that's going to happen. Also, I've got some friends that have told me in the past about their workplace and what they dictate, which I don't fully agree with as well. So obviously just moving slightly away now from the sexuality, being gay, not being out on an app like Grindr, that some workplaces will drug test people or will test them to see if they have alcohol or drugs in their system, which makes sense to me if you're operating heavy machinery or you're doing a practical, manual job like that where there's actual risks. Whereas if it's a job like you're a manager in an office, I don't really know why a workplace has the right to come in and drug and alcohol test you. I mean, obviously, if you're on drugs there and then or drunk there and then, that's a whole different matter. But if you had a drink with your mates on Saturday, or you partook in a bit of the devil's lettuce, as some people call it, a bit of gardening, as I like to say on TikTok, over the weekend. Michael Barrymore on TikTok, by the way. I've recently discovered him on TikTok, and if you haven't watched his content, please go and watch it. It's the best thing ever. It's so good, and he's a big gardener on TikTok. And so then why should they then come in on Thursday and drug test you and go, you've got this in your system? It's like, well, that was my weekend. It's not consciously affecting my job now. I feel like you've got to be pretty conservative or pretty right-wing to think that's acceptable. And also how drugs and stuff work. So the line there would be, if you're on them there at work, absolutely not. But if you'd done something a week ago or 5 days ago or in your own time, that you're allowed a life outside of work. Obviously, some of that stuff isn't legal, but still, I mean, I'm not going to go into it too much now, but drugs is the biggest open secret in the country. Let's be honest. We can't be pretending that millions of people every week are doing some form of drug that's probably illegal, class A, B or C or whatever. So it's the biggest open secret anyway. But so that kind of stuff, I'm like, that's really murky for me. And I don't really think it's very fair for them to force that on people. But then when we flip it back over to the original topic of sexuality, I just can't see it happening. I can't see any job reprimanding someone for being gay. It's not the 1970s or the 60s or whatever anymore. So yeah. Okay, so that was the first one from my past self. We're going to move on now to a guest voice note from my bestie, Bridgette Allen. We have been, before we play the voice note, I'll just give you a bit of an introduction to Bridgette. Bridgette and I have been great friends, really close now for 16 years. So we met in school. We met in year 11, I believe. She remembers this a little bit better than I do, because I couldn't remember if it was year 10 or 11. But anyway, we met when we were doing GCSEs. It was when I organised for charity an X Factor at the school. So I pretended to be Simon Cowell, basically, a bit of power, and organised the whole X Factor at the school. We had a judging panel with me and teachers, and we did the whole judges' classroom, judges' houses. We did a show at the end, and it raised, I think, over £1,000 for charity in the end. And she was a participant in it. She's a fantastic singer, so she sang in both rounds of X Factor that we did, actually. And our friendship has grown from there. So, yeah, we've been really, really close for a long time. She's someone that I really trust, someone that I love, such a close friend. I was actually thinking over the weekend about how precarious relationships can be, right? So when you cultivate self-love and respect for yourself, that's not going to be as precarious or as unsteady, because you can try your best to control that. So you can always have that trust in yourself. But then whether it's a friendship or a romantic relationship or even within a family, that's always precarious, because you never really know what someone's thinking or what they're going to do or their motivations. But then I thought, I've known Bridgette for so long, I trust her implicitly, like absolutely. She is someone that I have that trust in, and a really healthy, wholesome friendship. So I'm looking forward to her guest voice note.
Hello. I've just gotten back from a walk. Probably be a bit out of breath, which is embarrassing. It just made me think, I'll tell you why in a second, but I'd stand by the fact that I don't believe men specifically should be allowed to have their tops off in public spaces, other than at a beach or at a pool. Other than near a body of water. That should be the rule. I don't believe that men should be allowed to walk topless through town centres, around housing estates, all that kind of stuff. And it's unfortunate, it is, because obviously we're all supposed to be naked, really. But the way that things have become, with a certain species, or certain half of that species, is that obviously women can't show their breasts, because breasts are a sexual part of a human body, and yet a man's top half isn't. Thoughts? I don't know. But more the fact that I find it deeply intimidating. And I've always thought this, and I've started asking more people about it. And men and women, sorry, other way around, women and men are agreeing with me that they also find it intimidating. I would assume most women would, and any women that I have asked, around the office or friends or whatever, have said that yes, they do find it intimidating. And we're not 100% sure why. It just is more intimidating. But I've now ventured to asking male colleagues, and they also agree that it's intimidating when men have their tops off in public spaces. So I was on this walk, and a man with his top off was approaching me. And I mean, I don't enjoy, men approaching me in any way anyway, but him having his top off is what made me cross the road. And I wouldn't have otherwise. I would have just kind of, just walked past him, maybe in an awkward fashion. So yeah, that is a hill that I will die on with my top on.
Well, I can assure people that it's not just men and women, but it's the non-binary peeps and others as well that do not enjoy men having their tops off in public. And also, I think that the government should write it into some kind of law or legislation that you can only have your top off, as Bridgette said there, at a body of water. I enjoyed that. I also agree as well. So when you obviously at the beach, the sea is there as well, at the beach or at the pool or whatever, okay. But yeah, I think it is quite intimidating, actually. And what Bridgette was saying there about women's bodies or the kind of female form being sexualized is something that's just bothered me for so long. It's just like, how do we get to this place as a society where the form of your body is then sexualized and objectified to the point where men, mainly men, but others would say that someone deserved to be sexually abused, harassed or raped because of what they were wearing, because it's inherently sexual, when we should know that obviously we're born this way, it's a physical form, we have socially and culturally constructed and shaped that idea about it being sexualized. It's a funny thing, actually. I'm going to say this because it always makes me laugh, but I think it's so true. My mum used to say when we were younger, if you ever had a hands down or pants, she'd be like, why are you doing that? It's like, it's gross. But imagine if a woman had her hand down her pants. So imagine if you saw a woman walking down the street doing that, most people would be like really shocked or horrified. Whereas obviously some people don't like it or don't want to see it when men do it, but it's not as shocking as when men do it because they're almost allowed to be maybe do that kind of stuff publicly where women aren't, which is like no one should be just doing it anyway, let's be honest. So that really irks me about the sexualization of a body in that way and how that's also weaponized and how men get away with that. And that's also, loads of different things about how bodies have been represented in the media and culture and certain discourses around gender more broadly, I suppose, and patriarchal cultures. If we think of so like women not being able to have certain body parts, like, you think of like when you see men and they've got their like trackies or their jeans down where you can see their bum and their underwear. And again, imagine if a female or a woman walked around with their skirt down, bum out, you can see her pants. People would go over and say, pull that up. That's, some people would be like, maybe that's disgusting, or you shouldn't do that, or you're inviting this, you're inviting that. Whereas men do it, and yes, again, some people would be like, oh, for God's sake, or whatever, but not many people would be outraged by it. And that shows the completely different hypocritical standards for men and women. And men having their top off in public, I mean, I do find it a bit intimidating, like Bridgette did as well. I mean, I probably don't find it as intimidating, but that also could be from our sex-based differences. I don't know, like maybe her experiences as a woman, mine not as a woman, could have also influenced that. But, it's something I saw growing up on a council estate, and I am going to feed into a stereotype here, but it is, stereotypes contain a grain of truth, and often it is men on council estates or maybe from those backgrounds that are working class. You see them with the Stella, the top off, with a frigging England flag tattoo or whatever, walking around, and they would probably just think, because of their male privilege, they would think, well, I'm just walking around, it's a hot day, it's sunny, I want to catch a tan, I don't want to be sweating, I don't want material on me, so I'll walk around with my top off. But we know that that's not really a social standard, is it? Let's be honest, whether you agree with that or not. Other genders can't do that. So it just reeks of this male privilege, and also definitely can come across as quite intimidating, especially if it is those kind of people, those kind of men that are very traditionally masculine, or I was going to say toxically masculine then, but I don't think toxically is a correct phrase. That, that have that toxic masculinity as well, that it just all consolidates, doesn't it? If you see them with the dog, with their beer, with their top off, it gives that quite intimidating impression. And maybe some men from those backgrounds do want to give that impression. They do want to be quite intimidating. But broadly, nah, not great. Okay, well, thank you to Bridgette for that guest voice note. And we'll move on now to the final voice note from my past self. Just thinking about the difference between men who identify as gay or queer and then men who just enjoy having sex with men but aren't gay, let's say, just to use that term for ease, that some men will enjoy that act but don't want to spend their life with a man or be romantically invested with a man or be part of gay culture, etc. And then there's others where they love having sex with men or whatever, but then they're also invested in the culture. And to what extent that's like a useful divide and way of thinking about human sexuality and identity as well. Yeah, okay, so voice note there from a past self. I suppose what I'm really getting at there is this idea of like cultural identity versus just base sexual act. So being a gay man coming with expectations, a community and a subculture, and what comes with that. Like that can be lots of different things, like how you speak, the kind of words you use, the programs and films you watch, whether you go to gay bars or not, gay destinations like Sitges in Spain or San Francisco, as I've been to. And also talked about in previous episodes, or whether you are a person who actually wants to live their life with maybe a woman who identifies as straight but just enjoys the sexual act with men. So a lot of the time what people would say is, in academia they're normally called MSM, men who have sex with men. That's how they would be categorized, to try and move them away from the label of queer men or gay men, because not all of them want to identify that way or do identify that way. So when I've had this conversation with people in the past, they would usually say, and this is something I've often thought as well, it's like, oh, but they are really queer, or they are really gay, or bisexual. So deep down, or pansexual, deep down, they're like denying a part of themselves. And maybe that's almost part of their coming out is, I'll start with, slow steps. Like, I'll start with having sex with men, and then I'll identify as bi, and then maybe gay eventually, or maybe, they are legitimately bisexual or pansexual, and it's like these steps. But in my experience, without getting too graphic or too personal with it, I have, interacted with men, MSMs, men who don't see themselves as gay, who are fairly heteronormative and very much within that lifestyle and don't want to be gay. Because some people would say, and I've read this in like articles, academic works, had chats with people, that like this idea of straight men go on to Grindr, or men who have sex with men who go on to something like Grindr or Tinder and do that, it's almost like they're taking advantage of other queer people, like they're using them as an object, and like they're taking advantage of them. And it's almost kind of like maybe pathetic that gay men do that, because it's like, no, why would you go over to the other side? Why would you have sex with those kinds of men? Because they don't respect you, or they don't want to be part of our culture. Although I read a really interesting piece once that said, actually, you've not thought about it from the other way, that the person doing the act, being with the men who have sex with men, is also probably going to enjoy it and is conscious of that fact and wants to do it. So it's not as reductive or as bad as a lot of people think it is. There was also, I think it might have been Psychology Today or something like that, where I saw a post online where it was talking about this. And I think that's what actually sparked my past self to record that voice memo that was saying about, like, it's quite important that we differentiate the identity, the cultural identity and the community away from just the sexual act, because some people might ask the critical question of, what does it mean to be gay? It means just having sex with men, and that's it. That is what being gay or queer is, or whatever. Whereas others would then say, actually, it's way more nuanced and deeper than that, that it's about historical context, it's about the part of community, again, like I mentioned before, like the kind of holidays you go on, the clothes you wear, the sayings that you have, the way you speak, the programs you watch, whether it's like a HBO show like Looking or RuPaul's Drag Race, or you watch films like But I'm a Cheerleader, or you're very much invested in gay or queer cinema. All of that also helps to consolidate a queer or gay identity, not just who you have sex with or who you desire in a sexual or romantic way. So the more I think about it, I've had people push back at me on this, actually. They've, people kind of do a squinty-eyed look and they kind of go, no, I just really think that these people are gay, but because our society maybe doesn't always allow all types of people to come out, or maybe some men just have that shame and it takes them longer to come out, then that's really what it is. But I do believe that there are some people out there that just want to they just have that, like, desire to have sexual interactions with the same sex, but then they don't necessarily want to. Could you argue that people are maybe being a bit biphobic there, and maybe they are bisexual, but they don't want to, like, admit it, or don't want to put themselves in that camp? I suppose it comes down to, really, to give it like a classic left-wing answer, or maybe more liberal answer, is that as long as people aren't harming anyone, as long as everything's consensual and people are doing what they want in a consensual, healthy way, do we have to label it? Does it matter that much? It might to some people, it might not to others. I would say, actually, now as my present self, that was quite a long time ago that I recorded that voice note, I would now say I'm not so bothered. I don't know if that's going to become a category, like on Grindr, someone's like, I'm an MSM and this, that, and the other. But as long as everything's above board, healthy, consensual, etc., not too fussed personally. And I feel like you could get wrapped, even though when I'm talking now, I'm like, you could really get wrapped up in knots with this of like, they're bi, they're this, and they're that, and the other. But yeah, so sexuality, gender were like a big theme of today's episode. So yes. thank you very much for tuning in to episode 10 of Voice Notes from Connor. Thank you again, and ciao for now. You've been listening to Voice Notes from Connor. Created, hosted and starring me, Connor Winterton. Produced and edited by Evan Greaves. If you'd like to get in touch, you can message us on TikTok and YouTube. And if you'd like to get in touch via email, our email address is vnfcpodcast@outlook.com. You can send us any feedback, any thoughts on the episodes, as well as your own voice notes that might make it into future episodes or future series. So that was vnfcpodcast@outlook.com. Thank you very much.